Share with you the Escuela Nueva experience, which means new school. I think it's one of the longest bottom-up innovations of the developing world that's still being sustained, because innovations fade within bureaucracies. So I want to share with you first, this is the most important issue I wanted to highlight. It's been more than almost 30 years that I started from the margins of society of a developing country, which is, I think this is the most important thing. Being in the mud, in the really isolated schools where we started working, where there was the biggest inequality. So we demonstrated that it is possible to improve quality of education in low-income schools and public schools. So this is the first thing. Escuela Nueva is a cost-effective solution. Replicable. It was selected by the World Bank as one of the 3 innovations worldwide that had successfully impacted national policies. And this is why it has inspired many countries have come into Colombia, more than 40, and it's been adapted to more than 16 countries, reaching 5 million children. But I want to share with you 5 takeaways, and I want to make sure I'm doing this right. The first, it is possible to improve the quality of education in public schools, because we have a cost-effective solution. A second reflection, after 30 years when there was no internet, I have worked in schools in Africa, in isolated rural schools where there's so many difficulties. But another takeaway for you is more of the same is not enough. It requires a paradigm shift from teacher-driven pedagogy to what the French humanists said at the beginning of the century, child-centered, active participatory learning. Unfortunately, most of these principles only come to the elite schools, but not to the poorest of the poor. So this is a second takeaway. More of the same is not enough. It requires a paradigm shift from a teacher-driven pedagogy to a really child-centered. But we have to think systemically from the beginning, from the outset. If we wanted to there were so many problems, dropout, repetition rates, nothing of what the child learned had to do with the family or the community, low teacher morale. You have to work with unions, you have to work with teachers, teacher-centered education, no learning materials, ineffective training. A lot of money goes into education and training and nothing happens in the improvement of teaching practices. So education systems are like failed companies. Nothing works. So there were so many difficulties that we had to think systemically. We had to tackle all the variables simultaneously, not one in isolation. If we wanted to have changes with the children, we had to change the way working with the teachers, we had to changes of working with the parents, so we had to think systemically. And this is crucial. Another thing that for us is very important, learning should go beyond academics. Not only academics, we have to focus on 60% of children in Latin America in 4th grade do not understand what they read. So we have to focus on learning achievement, numeracy and literacy, but also going beyond academic achievements. We have to talk about 21st century skills. We have to have citizenship through education, peaceful democratic behaviors, because we're creating citizenry, what John Dewey said 90 years ago. I mean, the interesting thing is we have the philosophy, we know the principles, but something's happening in education systems. Another very important thing, and we started 30 years ago when no technology was there. Technology right now triggers change, but a new pedagogy is indispensable for effective learning, a new type of learning. I want to introduce this quote, which I think says a lot about what's happening in education. If you want to read it, for more than 100 years, the lack of school management methods has been the cause of countless complaints. But it has been only in the last 30 years that efforts have been made to find a solution to this problem. And what has resulted? Schools continue exactly the same as before. Who said it? Comenius in the year 1600. So my message here is everything has changed except the way of learning. Even if we know the pedagogy, even if the French humanists talked about it at the beginning of the century, but this only reached the elite schools again. I want to give an example. If a doctor from 100 years ago comes into a hospital today, the doctor is lost. Everything has changed in the health sector. If you bring someone from education from 100 years ago, a teacher, and put that teacher in a classroom today, the teacher is not so lost. So there's a message. Everything has changed except the way of learning. And we know education systems are going slower than the rest of society, as Francois Tadei and Salman just mentioned. So everything is changing so fast except the way of learning. We started working with formal schools, official schools. So we need a paradigm shift. Improving quality education implies more than expanding actual systems of education. More of the same is not enough. And this is a cultural change. It's going from a shift from transmission of knowledge to social construction of knowledge. Knowledge is constructed together in a collaborative manner. So that means a new role of the teacher for the 21st century. This is crucial. So this is where we have most of the problems. Faculties of education, teachers, colleges, everybody knows the principles, but we haven't changed the way of working with the teachers. So we had to rethink everything, the way of learning and the whole system, because I have focused more on basic education system, because that's where developing countries are needing the most support. So what does Escuela Nueva do? We started in the rural, isolated, multi-grade schools, multi-level schools, so one teacher handling diversity. And this is the beauty, because we were forced to challenge the conventional model of education, of going from frontal teacher-centered instruction into the principles we know 100 years ago: child-centered, active, participatory, and cooperative learning. This is crucial. It's not only personalized learning, it's cooperative learning also. So what does Escuela Nueva promote? It started as a local innovation in Colombia, became a national policy reaching 20,000 schools. It expanded to many other countries. It's been a cost-effective solution. So what does it promote? Nothing new in the philosophy. These images for you are not new. This is what happens in a good elite school, but not in public schools in developing countries. So we promote child-centered, active, participatory, and cooperative learning. Not all children learn the same thing at the same time. So it's self-paced learning, and we introduce the concept of flexible promotion. Children finish academic units at their own pace. Relevance. If it's not linked and it's not meaningful, life skills, if they're not incorporated, if there's no relevance, children don't learn. And this is the most important thing: a new role of the teacher as a facilitator, a leader that hears children, that promotes, facilitates, catalyzes, motivates, not a transmitter of instruction, because information is coming now in computers, in books, in different ways. It's packaged in a different way. So the role is a new role of the teacher, which is really somebody that's giving assessment during the process. Nobody gives assessment during the process, only at the end. Too late. Not even in the elite schools. So we need a new role of the teacher for the 21st century. We had to change the way of training the teachers if we want to change attitudes in teachers. In Latin America, we're very theoretical. We continue giving conferences on participatory learning. And we expect the teacher to make the change. So we had to, if we want to change attitudes, we needed that the teachers be exposed to the same active participatory methodologies that they were going to be used with their children. So this was a huge change. We were compensating for what faculties of education and teachers' colleges are not doing. The teachers know the theory, but they're left alone. We cannot leave the teachers alone, so we had to create teachers' learning circles or micro-centers, a community of learning among teachers. And this was before we had technologies. So teachers had to get together and share their solutions, not leave them alone. Help them to innovate, helping to change their new role. Everything the child learns has to be applied with their family and community. If we don't link the parents and the community in the learning process, but it's not through so many meetings, it's through the learning process. So how do we incorporate the family and the community? And a very important thing is citizenship and democracy is learned in school. John Dewey talked about this 90 years ago. And we had to develop a new generation of dialoguing, self-paced, self-directed, reusable learning guides. They're not textbooks. They're a hybrid between a textbook, a workbook, and the guide of the teacher. So we produce a lot of content and methodology, especially the pedagogics, which are the intelligent questions that usually are not systematized. But this is directed towards the children directly, so you start empowering children. We have challenges, how to virtualize all this, but we have had results with all these types of changes. They're textbooks that promote dialogue and interaction. This is a lot of social constructivism. So children work individually, in small groups, collaborating and promoting interaction. They're dialoguing all the time, in pairs. They incorporate the local culture in a very cost-effective way, because schools are supposed to incorporate the local culture. Simple instruments. I think something that was very important is that we have demonstrated, because Escuela Nueva has been highly evaluated, it demonstrates, it generates a culture of peace and citizenship, allowing boys and girls to learn and to be empowered and participate. And for all of the things I'm saying, we have empirical research behind, which is so important. It's not philosophy. Behind this, there's science. So Escuela Nueva has a systemic approach, many evaluations. UNESCO, University of London, Stanford University, where I did my studies, the World Bank, Colciencias, the research center in Colombia, National Planning Department. This was a study done by UNESCO 12 years ago. Colombia was around the middle. But all of a sudden, they said Colombia is the only country after Cuba where rural schools, where Escuela Nueva was implemented, outperformed urban schools, except to the mega cities. So this is extremely important, that it compensates for inequality. It is possible to improve quality education, and also to improve citizenship. These pedagogical routines that are oriented towards group work, participation, self-learning have a better chance of forming a democratic ethos than those that are simply merely directive. In a frontal classroom, how can you learn to participate? Results about democratic behavior. Children in Escuela Nueva, and these are indigenous schools in Guatemala, they give positive feedback. There's less negative feedback. They take turns, they lead processes, they take initiatives. So we had a study on the impact of Escuela Nueva on democratic behavior and peaceful social interaction, not only language and math. This was done by the University of London. And this is crucial, because when we compare children of conventional schools with the Escuela Nueva, children of Escuela Nueva have more peaceful social interaction. So coming out of Colombia is especially important. Girls' participation immediately is boosted because self-esteem and leadership skills come out. I saw this in a newspaper of Colombia. We need people who can work in teams. So you have the ability to solve problems, follow instructions, lead processes, meet deadlines, and especially learn to work in teams. And this is what companies are looking for, but this is what education systems are not producing. So we saw that for these skills are the 21st century skills, personalized and cooperative learning are essential for the 21st century skills. And I'm quoting Francois Tadei, who was just here with you. None of us alone is as smart as all of us together. So learning has to change in the classroom. And these are the 21st century skills. So we started at the margins of society with the poorest of the poor schools. And there were so many challenges that we ended up with 21st century skills. Learning to learn, creativity and innovation, critical thinking, problem solving, decision making, learning to synthesize information, how to communicate, especially how to work in teams. This is what 21st century skills are, and this is what entrepreneurial skills are. So we started at the margins and we ended up with these cutting-edge pedagogics. Escuela Nueva, without internet, has impacted 5 million children. Now we have new challenges and we can have leapfrogs in many things because we have a community of learning. We want to really see how we can introduce new technologies, but that respect the model of dialoguing among children. So that's so crucial, that they look at their eyes, because we promote empathy. If you don't promote empathy in the learning process, we will only have geniuses that only use one part of their brain. So these are some of the results. I mean, it's one of the 3 most outstanding reforms in the developing world. The Human Development Report selected Escuela Nueva as one of the main achievements. The Institute of Education demonstrating the impact on peaceful behavior of children. USAID has done studies in Guatemala with indigenous girls. And one of the most important things for us of the National Planning Department, Escuela Nueva compensates for socio-economic level. When you compare children of the lowest of the poor with the children of conventional schools of others, Escuela Nueva compensates for inequality. We have developed, I had to create an NGO. This has become a national policy in several countries, but we had to create an NGO to continue developing new things. Skills for the 21st century, empathy and social skills, peace and democracy, entrepreneurial education, and now we're starting to introduce digital resources. But of course, the main aim is leadership skills. So we just have developed a lot of partnerships. We don't want to grow our organization. It's a small NGO in Colombia, but we want to grow our impact. So we have learned to have a lot of partnerships and to work with many other different organizations from the private sector and from civil society. We were among the best 100 NGOs, and I just want to share with you a little video. It's an old video, unfortunately. Maybe the quality is not so good, but it's so old. But it's a 2-minute little video. So just so you can see how Escuela Nueva empowers children, because this is the art of participation. May we please show it? Sorry for the quality, but it's an old video, but it just demonstrates.
Realmente quiero contarles cómo fue en este segundo semestre la elección del gobierno escolar. Primero, se lanzaron conmigo 5 candidatos más. Segundo, nosotros hicimos campaña durante una semana con el propósito de mostrarle a los compañeros qué íbamos a hacer si llegábamos a ser elegidos. Elaboramos un proyecto como este, teniendo en cuenta el qué, el cómo y el para qué de las cosas. Nos proponemos lo que vamos a hacer. Olvidaba contarles que en estos días asistieron padres de familia con el fin de presenciar nuestra campaña. No solamente hicimos proyectos, sino que también hicimos carteleras, pancartas, en fin, diferentes actividades para motivar a nuestros compañeros. Al terminar la campaña, procedimos a votar. 5 padres de familia se encargaron del escrutinio. Mis compañeros votaron por mí, no porque yo comprara sus votos o por amistad. Ellos votaron porque vieron que yo soy la mejor.
Okay, so this is just a little synthesis of what's been happening in all these schools. Thank you so much.